While much has been said about Nazi war criminals fleeing to South America in the post-war, little is known about the German expansionist plans that predated World War II. 3 years before the war commenced, a secret plan was launched by the name of the Guiana Project. Under the cover of an innocent scientific expedition, Schulz-Kampfhenkel led a team of adventurers to research the area and report back to their superiors in Germany. The ultimate goal was to settle a bridgehead in South America after conquering a swath of the Amazon River basin. Journalist Jens Glüsing would later write that, quote, "The expedition started out with the usual scientific pretensions. But back in Germany, as the war started, Schulz-Kampfhenkel seized on this idea for Nazi colonial expansion." In the name of science. Independent Brazil and Imperial Germany jointly benefited from friendly cooperation, trade, cultural exchange, and economic progress. Moreover, a productive scientific collaboration eventually blossomed as several German academics and researchers arrived in the naturally rich country throughout the 19th century and the early 20th century. However, Germany was prohibited from carrying out scientific research abroad after the Versailles Treaty of 1919. SS Untersturmführer Otto Schulz-Kampfhenkel, a 24-year-old biologist and adventurer who had already forged a name for himself, was regarded as a militant zoologist for his scientific, geographical, and biological collaborations with the Nazi regime. Needless to say, he was impatient to breach the Versailles Treaty when he was selected to conduct an expedition into the Amazon. This expedition curiously coincided with an occult chapter in the history of Nazi Germany, the obsessive pursuit of Heinrich Himmler to find the purebred Aryan descendants of the lost civilization of Atlantis, whom he believed to be in Tibet and South America. Fascinated by esoteric and sinister tales, Himmler ordered several expeditions across the globe to look for the genetic traces of the Aryan race. Schulz-Kampfhenkel was an active participant in the Aryanization of the German Society for Mammals and led experienced pilot Gerd Kalle and engineer Gerhard Krauss into the mysteries of the Brazilian jungle. The adventurers arrived in South America in the summer of 1935. As they got ready to immerse themselves into the wild, the group hired another man in Rio de Janeiro. Schulz-Kampfhenkel later wrote, quote, "I'm trying to find a compatriot. After a lengthy search, I find the right man, Joseph Greiner, German abroad, a young, enterprising, and trustworthy sailor who joins our expedition group as the fourth member." It took Schulz-Kampfhenkel over 2 months to start the expedition. He had to attend custom clearances and visit authorities all over the capital, recounting how the mission's goals stemmed purely from a thirst for knowledge. However, the young scientist was accredited by the most renowned museums and natural history institutes in Germany, and he eventually got the support of the local authorities in the field. In joint cooperation between the German Propaganda Ministry, the Nazi Party's foreign organization, the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Biology, the Brazilian government, and the National Museum of Brazil in Rio de Janeiro, the expedition was finally ready to go. Ill-fated journey. The adventurers landed in the Amazonian Belém do Pará in October of 1935, ready to make their way to the Jari River. The base camp was set at the Santo Antonio waterfall near Santo Antonio da Cachoeira, and around 30 natives were hired to aid them in their ascent towards French Guiana. The group advanced upstream in 6 boats, and they soon realized that the Jari was enormous, an extensive body of water with countless steep waterfalls that made it impossible for their seaplane to drift. In the early stages of the enterprise, the Henkel HE-72 Sea Cadet that was supposed to promote the Nazis' technological advances crashed its tail against floating trunks and collapsed. Krauss and Schulz-Kampfhenkel were eventually rescued more than a kilometer away, hanging onto a floater. However, without the seaplane, the plans to map the Jari River were thwarted. The adventure then continued by boat, but the shallow river became overcrowded, and the leaders split the team and formed subcamps. While on his own, Schulz-Kampfhenkel was taken by surprise by a forceful flood, and his boat was lost, along with all his equipment, including cameras, cartography instruments, weapons, and provisions. After wandering in the rainforest for a week, he was rescued for the second time. Not long after, the Germans were enfeebled by malaria. Schulz-Kampfhenkel suffered from a severe case of diphtheria, but Greiner didn't survive. The intense fever eventually claimed his life, and he was interred on a small island in a tributary of the river. A swastika is displayed in the cross that marks the spot in L'Orangeal de Jarry, and his obituary reads, quote, "A death from fever in the service of German research work." As the men continued their mission, they arrived at the upper side of the Jarry River and set up a camp near a settlement of the Aparai tribe. If it wasn't for the skilled Indians, the foreigners couldn't have survived the jungle or traveled the river. The expeditionists then explored the surrounding jungle and its fauna, collecting thousands of zoological specimens. Schulz-Kampfhenkel also documented the culture of the Indians, their language, dances, and traditions, using almost 3,000 meters of film during the 17-month trek. Then, in May of 1937, the Germans returned to their home country. Plans for the future. In 1940, Schulz-Kampfhenkel presented a plan to Heinrich Himmler, chief of the SS and the Gestapo. The young adventurer proposed a strategy to rival American supremacy in the region. He'd explored the borders of French Guiana and put together a plan for a potential Nazi infiltration and colonization of the country. The neighboring colonies of French Guiana were Dutch and British holdings, now known as the independent nations of Suriname and Guyana. If the Third Reich could seize control of French Guiana and the surrounding colonies, it could blunt the United States' supremacy in the continent. The Guiana Project was proof of how grandiose the Nazis' dreams of world domination were, and the report delivered after the expedition read, quote, "The two largest scantily populated but rich in resources areas on Earth are in Siberia and South America. They alone offer spacious immigration and settlement possibilities for the Nordic peoples." Furthermore, there were already roughly 1 million Germans in the country at the time, and they could be the start of a great South American Third Reich empire. The North Amazonian jungle, a natural, virtually virgin land with a scarce population, was ideal for a tropical colony. However, Himmler gave priority to other urgent matters and replied to Schulz-Kampfhenkel, quote, "Given time, the plan may be submitted again." Years later, during World War II, French Guiana would become part of Vichy France, the French state headed by Marshal Philippe Pétain, which collaborated with Nazi Germany. Thank you for watching our video. Please let us know in the comments below what you think of the Nazi plans to conquer French Guiana. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to all our Dark Documentaries channels for more stories from the World Wars.